My name is Aurora Hale. I'm 29 years old. I knew something was wrong the moment my mother's text said, "Be home by 3. We need to talk." No emojis, no pleasantries. Just those 6 words, the kind that always meant trouble in the Hale household. By the time I reached their house, the familiar scent of lemon polish and money greeted me like a memory I never asked for. The formal dining room looked like it had been staged for a trial rather than a family meeting. My mother, Margaret Hale, sat at the head of the long mahogany table, pearls shining like armor. My father, Robert, adjusted his reading glasses with that slow, deliberate motion he used whenever he was about to deliver a serious talk. To their right, my older brother, Ethan, the golden child lawyer and unofficial family spokesperson, leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked as if he were about to cross-examine me. His wife, Clarissa, clutched her designer purse like it could shield her from whatever failure I was about to represent. There was even a chair waiting for me directly across from all of them. The defendant's seat. "Sit down, Aurora, Mom," said her tone polished, clipped, and frighteningly calm. I took the seat. The air felt heavy, like the kind that settles before a storm. Robert cleared his throat first. "Aurora, we've all been concerned." That word, concerned. It always meant judgment dressed in affection. Ethan leaned forward. "It's been, 8 months since you left Redwood Capital. You haven't said a word about where you're headed next." "Because I don't need to justify every move I make," I said evenly. Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that came with decades of disappointment. "Honey, we're your family. We just want to understand what's happening with you. You've changed." Changed, another word that meant wrong. Clarissa jumped in, voice sweet but sharp. "It's just, you used to be so polished. Now you're living downtown in that tiny studio apartment driving the Honda," Ethan supplied helpfully. "Yes, the Honda," Clarissa repeated with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I mean, I'm all for minimalism, but you used to drive a BMW." "I sold it," I replied. Dad's brows knitted together. "Aurora, we didn't raise you to live like a college student." "No, you raised me to live like someone afraid to fail," I said quietly. Silence. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the antique wall clock, loud and slow, each second slicing through the air. Ethan exchanged a look with Mom, the kind of silent family signal that always preceded an ambush. "Look," he said finally, "we get it. You're going through something. Maybe a quarter-life crisis. Maybe you're just burned out. But you can't keep floating like this. You have too much potential to waste." I almost laughed. Potential. The family's favorite currency. Mom folded her hands together. "When people ask what my daughter does, I shouldn't have to make excuses. I shouldn't have to say she's figuring things out." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit, because beneath the pearl-strung superiority, there was something real fear. Fear that I wasn't the daughter she could brag about anymore. "What exactly do you think I do all day?" I asked. They hesitated. Then Ethan answered, "Probably some kind of day trading or crypto thing." Clarissa said, "You're always on your computer." "That's not a career, it's gambling," Clarissa added quickly. I looked at her almost amused. "You'd be surprised what you can build with the right numbers and patience." Mom straightened. "Patience isn't the issue. Direction is. We just want to help you find your way again." My fingers curled around the edge of the table. "Find my way." Dad nodded. "Yes, you're smart, educated. You have every advantage. There's no reason to live beneath your potential." It was strange they spoke as if my life were some tragic detour, as if peace, independence, and freedom were signs of decay. I glanced at the clock again, 2:57 p.m., and then my phone buzzed. The vibration was faint, but in that heavy room it sounded deafening. I looked at the screen, Marcus Chen. My heart jumped. Of course it would be now. The third Sunday of the quarter, right on time. But I silenced the phone and placed it face down. "Who was that?" Ethan asked, eyes narrowing. "Work," I said simply. "Work," Mom repeated skeptically. "What kind of work calls on a Sunday?" "The kind that pays off," I muttered. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "Nothing," I replied, forcing a smile. "Please continue. What exactly are we doing here?" The look that passed between them confirmed what I already suspected. They had rehearsed this, planned it, scheduled it like a corporate meeting. Ethan cleared his throat and opened a sleek leather folder. "Actually, Aurora, we wanted to talk about your future." My stomach turned cold. Mom clasped her hands again. "This family can't stand by while you throw away your potential. We've taken some steps to help." Clarissa nodded eagerly. "We found some amazing job opportunities for you." There it was, the intervention. Dad leaned forward, his voice calm but absolute. "Aurora, this phase needs to end. It's time to rebuild your career. I looked at each of them, my parents, my brother, his wife, all staring at me like a broken project they were about to fix. I forced a breath and said quietly, "Go on, tell me what you've planned for me this time." Ethan slid the folder across the table toward me, like a contract I hadn't agreed to sign. "We've updated your resume," he said, his tone measured, patronizingly calm. "We filled the employment gap since you left Redwood Capital. We're calling it Independent Financial Consulting." Sounds respectable, right? I didn't touch the folder. I just watched his hand as he pulled it back, proud of his little performance. Mom's pearls clinked faintly as she adjusted them, a nervous tick she probably didn't realize she had. "Your father pulled some strings," she said. "We've arranged interviews for you this week, Tuesday with Merrill Lynch, Thursday with JP Morgan, and Redwood wants you back if you're willing to prove you're serious." "Serious," I repeated softly. "Right." And Clarissa interjected eagerly, unlocking her phone. "We found you a proper apartment. There's a 2-bedroom in Dad's building, modern, elegant, with concierge service. It's perfect for someone of your background." She turned the screen toward me, displaying glossy real estate photos. I didn't look. Dad leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Aurora, we love you. But this minimalist phase, this retreat from the world, isn't sustainable. You've had your time to find yourself. Now it's time to grow up." There it was, the unspoken truth said aloud at last. Grow up. The irony nearly made me laugh. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice even. "You all really think I'm lost, don't you?" Ethan exhaled. "Aurora, this isn't an attack." "Sure feels like one." He leaned forward. "Look, I know you're proud, but you're 29. You can't keep playing around with side projects. You need stability, a real career." Clarissa nodded sympathetically. "We just don't want you to waste your education. Wharton grads don't usually end up freelancing." The room tilted slightly as though the air had shifted. My pulse quickened, but I smiled faintly. "You think I'm freelancing?" Mom tilted her head. "Honey, what else could you be doing? You spend all day on your computer in that tiny apartment. You barely leave the house. You refuse to network, and you dress like someone free," I interrupted gently. Her mouth opened, then closed. The silence that followed felt thick enough to cut. For a fleeting second, I considered telling them everything. About Apex Capital, about the sleepless nights, the wild risk that had somehow turned into a miracle, about the silent victory that had changed everything. But I stopped myself. They wouldn't understand, not yet, maybe not ever. Instead, I asked, "Do you really think I need saving?" Dad's expression softened, but his tone was firm. "We're not trying to save you, sweetheart. We're trying to remind you who you are." I looked at him for a long moment. "No, Dad. You're trying to remind me who you wanted me to be." He blinked, stung. Ethan broke the tension, flipping another page of the folder. "You'll thank us later. You've always been talented. You just need the right environment again." "The right environment," I echoed. "You mean the one where I fit the family mold?" Clarissa's voice turned slightly defensive. "Aurora, everyone just wants what's best for you." "Everyone always does," I said quietly. I glanced around the table at the fine crystal glasses, the stiff floral arrangement, the perfect symmetry of everything in that room. It was a museum of their expectations, and I'd been one of its exhibits for 29 years. Then Mom spoke, her voice soft but cutting. "Aurora, if you keep rejecting our help, we'll have no choice but to step back. No more family dinners, no more financial safety net, no more enabling this aimlessness." I met her eyes. "So this is an ultimatum." "It's love," she said. "Tough love." I smiled faintly. Funny how it always feels like control. My phone buzzed again, the same vibration, steady, insistent. I glanced at the screen. Marcus Chen, Apex Capital. My pulse skipped. Of all times now. Mom's eyes narrowed. "Who keeps calling you?" "Work," I said again, standing up this time. "We're in the middle of something important," she snapped. "So am I," Aurora Dad said, voice heavy with authority. "Sit down." I looked at him calmly. "If you want answers, you're about to get them." And with that, I answered the call. "Marcus," I said, my tone suddenly crisp, professional, a voice they'd never heard from me before. "Ms. Hale," Marcus said, his voice bright with excitement. "I have fantastic news. Your hedge fund just cleared $3.8 billion in quarterly profits. The quantum computing investments exploded after Microsoft's acquisition. Congratulations, ma'am. You've officially outperformed every major competitor in the sector." The room fell silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Mom's face went pale. Ethan's hand froze halfway through, turning a page. Clarissa's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. I switched the phone to speaker. "Go on," I said, eyes still on them. "Tell me more, Marcus." "Of course. Apex Capital Management has entered the top 10 performing hedge funds in North America. The renewable energy portfolio is up 340% year over year, and your AI healthcare projects are drawing international attention. Oh, and congratulations on the Forbes 30 Under 30 feature. They're calling you the most innovative fund manager of the decade. My father's glasses slipped down his nose. My mother's hands trembled against the tablecloth. I smiled softly. Thank you, Marcus. Please send the full report to my email and confirm tomorrow's meeting with the Treasury Secretary's office. Already scheduled, he said cheerfully. And Ms. Hale, you're officially one of the youngest billionaires in financial services history. The silence that followed was absolute. I ended the call and placed the phone gently on the table. Then I leaned back, folded my hands, and looked at my stunned family. So I said quietly, "What were you saying about my wasted potential?" For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of the grandfather clock in the corner filled the silence, each tick stretching into eternity. My father's hand still rested on his glasses frozen mid-polish. Clarissa's designer purse had slipped to the floor unnoticed. Ethan looked like he'd been slapped by a ghost. Mom finally found her voice. It was faint trembling. "Aurora, what was that?" I tilted my head slightly. "A work call. The kind you didn't think I had." Ethan blinked rapidly, his lawyer's brain scrambling to process numbers that didn't make sense. 3.8 billion, that can't be real. "Oh, it's very real," I smiled softly. "I've been running Apex Capital Management for nearly 2 years now." Dad swallowed hard. You started a hedge fund?" "Yes." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. After leaving Redwood, I realized I didn't want to build someone else's empire anymore, so I built my own. Clarissa was still staring at my phone as though it were a bomb that might detonate again. "But how? How could we not know?" "Because you never asked," I said. "You assumed I was lost, that I needed rescuing. You didn't notice the late nights, the calls, the research papers scattered across my table. You saw chaos where there was actually creation." Mom pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "Aurora, why didn't you tell us?" I met her eyes. When, during family dinners, where you measured success in job titles and car brands, or maybe during the phone calls where you warned me about ruining the family reputation. She flinched, her lips parting, but no words came out. Ethan finally stood pacing the room, his voice tight. "You're saying you've built one of the top 10 hedge funds in North America and you didn't tell anyone." "I didn't hide it," I said evenly. "I just stopped explaining myself." Dad exhaled slowly. "Apex Capital. I've seen that name." "You should have," I replied. "Your firm Hale & Brooks Real Estate Holdings Apex manages part of your pension fund." His head jerked up. "That's you." "Yes," I said softly. "You've been my client for 18 months. The shock hit him like a physical blow. His glasses fogged slightly, and he took them off again, not to clean this time, just to think. Clarissa finally dared to speak. "Aurora, you're famous. There are articles." She picked up her phone and began frantically scrolling. Forbes, Bloomberg, the Financial Times. My God. I leaned back in my chair, feeling an unfamiliar mix of satisfaction and sadness. That's me, the mysterious fund manager who came out of nowhere. Ethan's voice cracked with disbelief. 12.7 billion under management. Personal net worth over 4 billion. You're still the same sister who drives a beat-up Honda, I interrupted gently. Wealth doesn't have to look like arrogance, Ethan. Dad let out a shaky laugh, part disbelief, part admiration. You've been sitting here while we tried to save you. I didn't need saving, I said quietly. I needed you to believe in me. The truth hung there raw and heavy. Mom's eyes glistened. Aurora, we only wanted to help. I know, I said softly, but you didn't want to understand. There's a difference. The room, once so tense with judgment, now felt fragile like a porcelain doll with its cracks finally showing. Ethan sank back into his chair. You could have told me, he murmured. You could have told us. I smiled faintly. Would you have believed me if I did? He looked down, unable to answer. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dad spoke again, his tone quieter, more human. Aurora, I owe you an apology. I thought you were throwing your life away. But it turns out you were building something far greater than we could imagine. I nodded slowly. I wasn't trying to prove you wrong, Dad. I was just trying to prove me right. Outside sunlight filtered through the window blinds, cutting the dining room into narrow stripes of gold and shadow. It struck me how symbolic that felt the two worlds I'd been straddling finally meeting in the middle. Clarissa picked up her fallen purse with trembling hands. So, when Marcus said you're meeting with the Treasury Secretary, that's true, I said. We're working on sustainable banking regulations. It's part of a bigger initiative I'm leading. Mom shook her head in disbelief. You've accomplished all this. And you didn't tell us because what you thought we wouldn't understand. No, I said, my voice soft but firm, because I needed to build something that was mine. Not Robert Hale's daughter's success. Not Ethan Hale's sister's career. Just Aurora. Ethan stared at me for a long time, his jaw clenched, pride and shame battling on his face. So, all this time we thought you were failing. Maybe I was failing, I said with a wry smile. Failing to fit into your world. But that doesn't mean I wasn't thriving in mine. For the first time that afternoon, the air in the room shifted, the tension dissolving into something new: respect. Unsteady, awkward, but real. Mom wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, My God, Aurora, what have we done? I reached across the table, my voice gentler now. You loved me the only way you knew how. But sometimes love can look a lot like fear. Her chin quivered. Can you forgive us? I hesitated. I already did. The day I stopped needing your approval. A long silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, Clarissa laughed, a small, nervous laugh that rippled through the room like a spark. So, just to be clear, she said weakly, we staged an intervention for a billionaire. I smiled. Seems that way. Ethan rubbed his face and groaned. God, this is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Good, I said, standing up. Maybe next time you'll ask before you assume. They all watched as I gathered my bag, calm and unhurried. I paused by the doorway and turned back to them. For what it's worth, I said, I don't blame you. You taught me to think long-term, to take risks, to work harder than anyone else. You just never thought I'd use those lessons to build my own empire. And with that, I left them sitting in stunned silence, their perfect world cracked wide open by a truth they never saw coming. No one moved for what felt like minutes after I left the table. The sound of my heels echoed softly against the marble floor, the only rhythm left in a house that had just been turned inside out. But before I could reach the doorway, my mother's voice, small shaken, called after me, Aurora, please don't go. I stopped, slowly turned. She was standing now, trembling slightly, her pearls askew, her face pale in the afternoon light. My father was still seated, elbows on the table, staring down at the folder Ethan had prepared for me, the one full of lies meant to cover my failures. I sighed and walked back, my heart still steady but heavy. Mom looked up at me. I just need to understand. How did this happen? How did you not see it happening? I asked gently. 2 years ago, I quit Redwood because I couldn't breathe in that life anymore. I spent nights studying new financial models, researching sectors nobody cared about yet. Quantum computing, biotech, clean energy. I risked everything I had. Ethan frowned. But how did you even start? You didn't have venture partners, investors. I had belief, I said quietly, and one loyal friend who trusted me enough to invest the first seed fund. The rest came after they saw results. Dad lifted his eyes. And you ran it alone. Mostly. Until I built a team, small, loyal, brilliant. The kind of people who believe in the future more than their resumes. Clarissa spoke next, voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell your family we could have helped? I shook my head. That's exactly why I couldn't. Every time I tried to share something unconventional, you all dismissed it. Remember last Christmas when I mentioned quantum computing investments? Mom blinked. You said it sounded risky. You told me I was gambling with money I couldn't afford to lose, I said softly. But that gamble became $1 billion return. Mom's lips trembled. We were trying to protect you. From what I asked? From failure? From disappointment? Or from becoming someone you couldn't control anymore? That silence again, the kind that hurts to sit in. Dad finally spoke, his voice unsteady. Aurora, we underestimated you. I smiled faintly. You didn't underestimate me, Dad. You just measured me by your standards. You thought success only counts if it looks expensive. Ethan stared at the table, guilt flickering in his eyes. I looked up to you, he muttered. I just didn't recognize you anymore. You were always the golden one, the one who had it all figured out. When you left Redwood, I thought you'd lost your mind. I had, I said simply, but sometimes you have to lose your mind to find your purpose. Clarissa scrolled on her phone again, her eyes widening. You really are everywhere. Forbes called you the conscience of Wall Street. The Economist says you're redefining sustainable capitalism. Big words for a girl in jeans, I said with a smirk. That made Ethan laugh, a short, embarrassed sound that seemed to release something in all of us. Dad leaned back in his chair, staring at me with a strange mix of pride and regret. Do you know what hurts the most? He said quietly. It's realizing that while I was teaching you everything I knew about long-term investment patience and risk management, You were listening. Just not in the way I expected. I nodded slowly. Exactly. You taught me discipline, strategy, and endurance. You just never realized I'd use those lessons to build something outside your world. He exhaled deeply as if deflating. You've built an empire, and I didn't even see it. I didn't want you to, I said gently. Not until it was real. Mom wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I'm proud of you, Aurora. I am. I feel like I failed you as a mother. You didn't fail me, I said. You just forgot who I was. You saw me through fear, not love. Her face broke then, the proud mask crumbling. When you left Redwood, I thought you were running away from your potential. I didn't see that you were running toward it. I smiled sadly. Maybe now you do. She nodded. Slowly tears, slipping freely. And the way we treated you today, the intervention, the lectures, wasn't about me, I said softly. It was about your fear of what people would think. That's okay, Mom. I get it. You built your whole life on appearances. I just chose a different kind of success. The air felt different now, lighter but raw. Dad finally stood walking around the table toward me. Aurora, forgive us. Please. I looked at him for a long moment. He'd always been the anchor, strong, rational, unbending. Seeing him this humble shook something deep inside me. I already did, I said quietly. But maybe you should forgive yourselves too. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly. I just realized something. I glanced at him. What? He gestured toward the table. You technically manage my firm's pension fund, which means... I grinned. Yes, little brother. You're technically on my payroll. Clarissa gasped, then burst into laughter. Oh, that's poetic. Even Dad smiled, rubbing his forehead. The universe has a sense of humor. Mom laughed through her tears. We staged an intervention for a billionaire. Correction, I said lightly. A self-made one. That made them laugh harder. The tension finally broke laughter, mixing with disbelief, apology, with admiration. For the first time in years, the Hale family sounded human again. When the laughter faded, Mom looked at me and whispered, Aurora, can we start over? I nodded slowly. We can. But this time let me lead. Dad exhaled relief and pride mingling on his face. Deal. And for the first time that day, I saw something real in their eyes. Not judgment, not expectation. Just love stripped bare. For a long time, we didn't speak. The house that had once been full of sharp words and unspoken expectations now held something gentler, disbelief melting into understanding. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. I can't believe we actually rehearsed speeches to save you. Clarissa smiled faintly, still scrolling through the articles on her phone. To be fair, the headlines make you sound like a superhero. The silent billionaire reshaping Wall Street. She looked up. You should have told me. I could have bragged first. I laughed softly. I think you've done enough bragging for one lifetime. Even Mom chuckled, though her voice was still thick with emotion. Aurora, I don't know whether to hug you or ground you. You could start with a hug, I said gently. She stood, and for the first time in years, wrapped her arms around me. Not the polite social kind of hug, but the desperate kind, the I thought I lost you kind. I felt her shoulders shake. When she pulled back, she cupped my face in her hands. I wasn't angry because you left your job, she whispered. I was scared. I watched your father's friends' kids fall apart after taking risks like that. I didn't want that for you. You're my baby. Her voice cracked on the last word. I know, I said softly, and I love you for it, but your fear became my cage. She nodded, eyes red. Then maybe it's time I opened the door. Dad cleared his throat, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. Aurora. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't shaken. But also I'm proud of you, more than I can say. He glanced at the folder still sitting between us. All this time I thought I was the teacher. Turns out you were teaching me. What lesson? I asked. He smiled weakly. That success isn't defined by what people can see. It's what you build quietly when no one's clapping. For a man who had built his entire empire on public image, that meant everything. Ethan crossed his arms, still wrestling with the embarrassment. So I guess this means you won't be moving into the apartment Clarissa found you. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I'm tempted. It looked like a nice closet. Clarissa laughed. You could probably buy the entire building now. Dad smiled faintly. She probably already owns half of it. I shrugged. Not that one, but close. Mom looked at me again, gentler this time. What about the car? Please tell me you'll at least consider upgrading from that Honda. Maybe someday, I said. But I like it. It reminds me where I came from. Ethan groaned dramatically. You're impossible. Practical, I corrected. We all laughed again, the kind of laughter that feels like an exhale after years of holding your breath. When it quieted, Dad grew thoughtful. Aurora, can I ask you something? Of course. What drives you now? I mean, you've achieved more by 29 than most do in a lifetime. What keeps you going? I hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. Honestly, the idea that I can do something good with it. The wealth, the influence, it's not about the numbers anymore. It's about impact. That's why my next fund focuses on sustainable technologies. I want to prove that capitalism doesn't have to destroy what it touches. Ethan whistled softly. That's big. It has to be, I said. Otherwise, what's the point? Clarissa smiled. You're making me rethink my job. Good, I teased. Maybe that's the start of your intervention. She laughed. Touché. Mom reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. Aurora, I don't want to lose you again. So promise me something next time. Don't shut us out completely. We may not always understand your world, but we still want to be part of it. Her voice wavered with sincerity. I nodded. Okay, but there's one condition. What is it? Next time you think I'm ruining my life, just ask me why before you try to fix it. Her eyes softened. Deal. Ethan added, and maybe we celebrate your wins instead of trying to correct them. That would be nice, I said, smiling. Dad looked around the table at the opened folder, the untouched glasses of water, the scattered pride, and shook his head, chuckling under his breath. I can't believe I almost told you to sell your Honda and buy a BMW. I laughed. You're welcome to buy yourself one if it helps you cope. He laughed too genuinely this time. I'll think about it. For the first time in my life, the air in that dining room didn't feel suffocating. It felt honest, human, warm. It wasn't the setting that changed. It was the truth finally allowed to breathe. When I stood to leave, Mom touched my arm. Aurora, she said softly, are you still coming for dinner next Sunday? I paused, smiling. If you promise no interventions. She smiled back through her tears. Only dessert. Then I'll be there. And for the first time, I meant it. The following Sunday, I pulled up to my parents' house again. Same driveway, same perfectly trimmed hedges, same white columns gleaming in the sunlight. But this time, something felt different. The weight that used to press down on my chest every time I visited was gone. I parked my little silver Honda between Dad's Tesla and Ethan's gleaming black Mercedes. It looked hilariously out of place and somehow perfectly right. When I walked inside, the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary greeted me instead of tension. The formal dining room had been replaced by a setting I barely recognized, softer lighting. Casual tableware, even laughter drifting from the kitchen. Mom turned around. First apron tied over her designer blouse, a warm smile spreading across her face. You're early. Habit, I said, stepping in. I didn't want to miss the pre-intervention cocktails. She laughed, shaking her head. No interventions, I promise. Tonight's just family. Dad appeared behind her, wine bottle in hand. We even downgraded to store-bought champagne. Thought it might help us feel more humble. I chuckled. I appreciate the effort. Ethan was at the stove of all places trying to saute vegetables. Look who decided to grace us with her presence, he said. The family overachiever. Careful, I teased. I manage your pension fund, remember? He grinned. Touché. Clarissa was setting the table, her phone abandoned on the counter, a rare miracle. We read that Forbes piece, she said. The conscience of Wall Street not bad for someone who dresses like a college student. I smirked. Maybe that's the secret. Comfort equals power. The laughter came easy now. The Hale household, once a battleground of pride, felt almost peaceful. We ate together for the first time in months without the invisible scoreboard between us. Dad actually listened when I talked about my projects. Mom didn't interrupt with suggestions or criticisms. Ethan asked questions, real ones, curious and kind about the new fund I was building. So what's next for Apex, he asked between bites of chicken. I hesitated, savoring the moment before answering. We're launching a sustainability branch, focusing on agricultural technology, clean water systems, soil regeneration, vertical farming. It's risky, but if it works, it could feed millions. Dad raised his glass. To risk the kind that changes the world. We all clinked glasses. For a brief second, I caught Mom watching me pride, shining through tears she was too proud to shed. You've grown so much, she said quietly. I can't believe I almost mistook your strength for failure. I smiled. We all mistake strength for something else sometimes, especially when it doesn't look like what we expect. The conversation drifted from work to childhood memories, summers by the lake, arguments over Monopoly. Even the time I accidentally crashed Ethan's first car. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. After dinner, I helped Mom with the dishes. She handed me a plate to dry. Her expression soft. You know, she said I used to tell my friends that my daughter was finding herself. Now I think she was finding us too, just in her own way. I smiled. Maybe I was. She nodded. You've taught me something important, Aurora. That success doesn't always come dressed the way we expect it, and that sometimes letting go is the best kind of love. I touched her arm. You've taught me something too. That love doesn't have to look like control, it just has to be patient enough to wait for understanding. Her eyes glistened, and she smiled. You really are your father's daughter. And maybe a little mine, too. When I finally left, the sky had turned a deep violet stars faintly visible through the trees. The house behind me glowed softly, no longer the fortress of judgment I'd once dreaded, but a place that finally felt like home again. I slid into my Honda, the worn leather seat familiar beneath me. As I started the engine, I caught a glimpse of my family through the rearview mirror, laughing together in the doorway, waving as I pulled away. The headlights cut a narrow path through the night, the same route I'd driven countless times before. But this time, it didn't feel like an escape. It felt like arrival. For years, they thought they needed to save me. Turns out, I'd been saving myself all along.